Welcome to the Beau Show. Months ago, I was able to sit down with political strategist and former Trump consultant Roger Stone. You may recall that his home was raided in 2019 by the FBI, and he was arrested on federal charges, for which he was later pardoned by President Trump. With Mar-A-Lago being similarly raided last week, I wanted to get Roger's inside scoop on how the raids work and what the FBI may be after. This is a troubling yet now consistent move by our agencies at the behest of political leaders looking to punish political opponents. Here's part one of my interview with Roger Stone. Roger, thanks so much for joining me again. On January 25th, 2019, at 6 a.m., the FBI showed up to not the home we're in now, but a different home, to raid your home and arrest you. Were you expecting it at all? And tell me what damage the FBI did.
Well, I was expecting it. First of all, there was a media drumbeat that had built to a crescendo because Robert Mueller and his thugs leak prolifically in violation of the law. CNN, MSNBC, Newsweek, the New York Times, the Washington Post. Stone's arrest is imminent. Mueller tightens the noose on Stone's neck. Stone in the spotlight. So I knew that something was going to happen. I was kind of perplexed because I couldn't understand what the crime might be. I'd never had any collusion with the Russians. I had no contact from the Russian state. My exchanges with WikiLeaks were minimal, innocuous, and they had been handed over to the House Intelligence Committee a year before. So I was trying to figure out what crime is it that I could possibly be arrested for. The evening before the 24th, Sarah Murray with CNN called me and asked me for my address because she said she wanted to mail me something. This was illogical because my address can be found online. But then when I looked online, I realized because I had moved about 6 months prior, there were two different addresses listed for me, and therefore I think she was just trying to ascertain where I really lived. I said to my wife at that time, so they're coming to arrest me in the morning. And my wife said, you've been saying that every week for the last 10 weeks. And I said, no, this time I'm pretty sure. I still don't know what the charge might be. So I set my alarm for 5 o'clock. I got up at 5 a.m., I took a shower. I put on my Roger Stone Did Nothing Wrong t-shirt because I do understand product placement in case I was going to be arrested. And I was selling them to raise money for my legal defense. By the way, if you want one, you can go to rogerstonestore.com. And I was sitting in an upstairs bedroom window. I had a Bible open in my lap, and I opened it to a section that specifically says, I will not be shaken. It's the last thing I read. And I saw the lights from the red lights from the 17 armored vehicles that arrived on my street. Now, I lived on a cul-de-sac, so it was a dead-end street, a short dead-end street. They closed off the end of the street to all other media. Only CNN was allowed beyond the ropes. I have an affidavit from a Fort Lauderdale police officer who had been called in to back up the FBI. When he saw the camera crew, he'd been told no media, so he said, you're going to have to leave. And he got chewed out by a senior FBI agent who said, no, CNN has special permission to be here.
Who told them? How'd they get tipped off?
Well, that's pretty simple. I was arrested at 6:06. At 6:11, the same Sarah Murray contacted my attorney by text and said, your client has just been arrested. He did not yet know. He said, on what charge? She sent him a copy of my indictment. My indictment was sealed until 9:30 in the morning. So how could CNN have a copy of my indictment at 6:11? It had no court markings on it. It had no timestamp on it. So it wasn't a court document. But in the metadata tags, it had the initials of Andrew Weissman, the epically corrupt prosecutor who's really running the Mueller investigation. So CNN taking an award from the White House Correspondents Association for their tough investigative report, that's nonsense. They were tipped off. By the way, they were also the first ones there for the raid on Paul Manafort's home. But tipped off by the same people.
So about 24 agents showed up pre-dawn with tactical gear, heavily armed, and CNN footage makes it look like they were doing a kingpin drug raid or an Al-Qaeda cell. Was this raid on you unusual, since none of the other Mueller arrests were done this way?
Well, it was unusual in view of the fact that the judgment is he a flight risk? I didn't have a valid passport. I didn't own a firearm, although I support the Second Amendment. I have young grandchildren, so I'm just not comfortable having a gun in the house. And I can't afford a gun safe. And I'm very recognizable, Beau. I mean, where was I going to go?
Right.
They did pull these FBI boats up to the dock. I lived on a canal on the dock, but the truth is I can't swim. So I wasn't going anywhere. I had no intention of going anywhere. But they argued that I had to be arrested in this over-the-top manner because I was a flight risk. Yet 4 hours later when I was arraigned, 5 hours later when I was arraigned, the government didn't ask for a cash bond for my release, which means by definition, they never thought I was a flight risk. This was designed to vilify me, to make me look like some kind of a criminal. They sent fewer men after bin Laden.
So you didn't have a passport. You weren't a flight risk. Were they think that they could surprise you for documents? What was the reasoning for the pre-dawn?
Well, they tore through my house for 13 hours, very similar to what they did to Donald Trump at Mar-a-Lago. They found nothing of any value. They found nothing that was brought up in my trial. No, in retrospect, I think that the motive was intimidation, because they would later come back in July and pressure me to testify falsely against Trump. In other words, Mueller's prosecutors went to two federal judges and convinced them that they had probable cause to arrest me for all kinds of extraordinary crimes: treason, conspiracy against the United States, counterfeiting, money laundering, mail fraud, wire fraud, all nonsense. Then, because they believed Twitter and they believed their own BS, when they got into my email and my text messages, where there was a lot of material, because I'm one of these guys who doesn't erase anything because I have nothing to hide, they couldn't find any evidence of Russian collusion or WikiLeaks collaboration. So they then had to fabricate the crime of lying to Congress because they had no other crime.
Former FBI agent Michael Gurman said that your arrest was not overly militarized, but perhaps a response to your statements about a civil war and photos with guns. Isn't that a way of targeting anyone who expresses their First and Second Amendment rights?
I'm not sure. I don't think I've ever been photographed with a gun. There's some video of me in a gun range shooting with Alex Jones. I have a Second Amendment right to do that.
Of course.
I predicted that if Trump was removed by Mueller, that there could be a civil war. That's political commentary that I'm entitled to. Terry Tucci with the CNN, formerly with the FBI, higher ranking than the gentleman you just mentioned, said that this raid was over the top and does not fit the requirements. What's interesting, of course, is to this day we still don't know who approved this raid. Lindsey Graham, the senator from South Carolina, who pretends to like Donald Trump and hates Donald Trump, fired off a letter to the FBI demanding to know who approved the raid on Stone's home. He got great headlines on it, which was the purpose. They never answered his letter, and he never inquired further about it.
So you were violated in this dramatic way, and now as of last week, the former president, Donald Trump, also has now experienced a similar violation. Talk about the similarities between your raid and the Mar-A-Lago raid and the histrionics around it.
I think there are many. First of all, they could simply have gone to my attorneys and asked that I turn myself in, which would have saved the American taxpayers $1.1 million, because that's what the raid cost. The government was on suspension at that time because we had no budget, so every FBI agent got time and a half. Secondarily, in the case of Trump, they could have simply gone to court, got a restraining order preventing him from removing the documents, and then filed for a lawsuit for the return of the documents. But instead, they elected to raid his home. They came by air, sea, and land, just like they did with me. 17 armored vehicles, helicopter. There were boats in Lake Worth, FBI boats in Lake Worth, way over the top. And of course, they were in my house for 13 hours. My home is somewhat smaller than Mar-A-Lago. They were in his house for 9 hours, just as they went through Melania Trump's closet and all of her personal effects. They went through my wife's closet and all of her personal effects. I mean, they literally, my place was a shambles when they destroyed it. Take out drawers, dump them on the floor, go through the bookcase, take out every book, leaf through it, throw it on the floor, go through the pictures hanging on the wall. I had a picture of my mother, punch it out to make sure there's nothing hidden inside the frame. It was all nonsensical. While they didn't do as much destruction, I think I'm one of the few people who can appreciate the feeling of violation that President Trump and his wife feel. I can't imagine why they had to go into Melania's closet. They knew specifically that there were 15 boxes of documents. They had been in good faith negotiations. They had asked the president, the archivists and the DOJ had asked the president to put a more secure lock on the storage facility. He complied immediately. Then they showed up to dramatically break the lock that they ordered to be put in place to begin with. So the optics of this are very similar.
Intimidation.
Intimidation.
Okay.